Welcome to Super Training. My name is Chris, and in this video, we're going to talk about SAP, including what it is, what it does, and some career opportunities that are available in the SAP ecosystem. I'm going to keep this video very basic, so we're not going to be getting into technical jargon or anything like that. If you're totally new to SAP, you should have no problem with this video. Now, when talking about SAP, it's really important to start off by understanding what is ERP software. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, which is probably the least descriptive acronym ever. It basically means it's a type of software, it's a category of software that can handle all different aspects of a business all in one. So instead of what you would usually have where, let's say you wanted to handle the accounting in your business, you might get software like QuickBooks. Or if you want to handle customer relationship management, you might have Salesforce. For projects, you could use Monday.com. These are all software that have a particular specialty that they get used for. But instead of having 10 different pieces of software that all handle some aspect of your business, a lot of companies choose to have one software that covers everything. So all of your information is in one place. So that's what an ERP is. And by no means is SAP the only ERP software. There's many different competing products. For example, Oracle has a particular product called NetSuite. I've made many videos and courses on NetSuite, and that product is particularly targeted for small to mid-sized companies. Microsoft also has a very popular ERP product called Dynamics 365, and then SAP, which is a company, has products and particularly makes products that are oriented for the most part with large companies, also known as enterprise-sized companies. So that's where SAP comes into the picture. And let's now take a look at what the word SAP even means. So SAP is actually a German acronym, and to translate it into English, it stands for Systems, Applications, and Products in Data Processing. So to give a little bit of a background on SAP as a company, SAP was founded in Germany in 1972, right at the beginning of the computer and software age, and it really just grew exponentially over the decades, to the point where right now, SAP employs over 100,000 employees, and Forbes magazine listed SAP as the 5th largest software company in the world, bigger than Adobe, Intuit, and by some metrics, even IBM. Now, earlier on, I said that SAP is particularly targeted towards large companies. But to prove that point, if you look at the Fortune 500 list, which is the 500 biggest companies in the United States, roughly 85% of them use and rely on SAP for their ERP software. So that should give you a concept of SAP as a company. Now let's take a look at some of the SAP products. Unlike some other companies, such as Oracle's NetSuite, where really it's just one product that's been updated and improved over the years, SAP has had dozens of different products over the decades. And we're not going to be diving into every single product, but there's a few I think are important to highlight. First off, in 2004, SAP came out with ECC, which stands for ERP Central Component. It was an on-premise ERP option, so it existed literally physically on location for the business, and it was incredibly popular. Over the years, it came to dominate, especially amongst SAP products and just amongst ERP products in general. A few years later, in 2007, they came out with Business by Design, which was more intended for small to mid-sized companies. But what was unique about that was that Business by Design was the first SAP product that was exclusively on the cloud. So that was kind of their first foray into having solely cloud-based ERP software. Fast forward to 2015, and SAP comes out with one of their most consequential products and one that is still the flagship product as of today, and that is S/4HANA. That is literally the name of the product. And just to break down what that means for a second, S stands for simple. The 4 is in relation to, if you look at the full timeline of SAP products, they've come out over the years with almost like generations of products. So there was their R1, which was first generation. Then many years later, they had R2, then R3. And this is like the fourth generation of their ERP software. So it's S4, and then HANA is the name that they have for their database that they released in 2010. Prior to that, they were reliant on other companies' databases like Oracle, and after years of development, they finally came out with the HANA database, which, without getting into the technicalities of it, it is a very powerful database. It's incredibly fast. So they finally had their own proprietary database that they could use for all their products moving forward. So just to recap on the full product, S4HANA stands for Simple Fourth Generation Using the HANA Database. And that product, S4HANA, is either on-premise or it can be used in the cloud. You have both as an option. And as I mentioned earlier, while in the past SAP has come out with new products very frequently, at this point, they've made it very clear that S4HANA is going to be their flagship product for the next probably 20 years. So they have this and they're just going to be making improvements and additions to S4HANA. Now, the last thing I want to mention in relation to S4HANA is about the user interface. When looking at older products from SAP, let's take ECC for example, it had a very old school user interface. It was clunky, it looked like it was straight out of the 90s, and it was hard for users to grapple with. So a couple years before S4HANA came out, they introduced a new user interface called Fiori, which is just kind of a catchy Italian name to represent this new user interface. In general, it's a much cleaner, more modern look, and it's definitely more user-friendly. So if you're using S4HANA, you will be interacting with the Fiori user interface. So hopefully that gives you a concept of the ERP space, SAP as a company, as well as some of its key products. But if you're watching this video, I doubt you're interested in buying SAP yourself. It runs in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to implement. So more than likely, you're watching this from a standpoint of career options for yourself. So let's talk briefly about what are the career options in the SAP ecosystem. And to keep things really simple, I consider that there's really three major categories of career options. The first one is you could say the consultant class, which basically means, and let's set up a scenario here. Let's say ABC company is trying to implement SAP and they need to basically set their systems up. And so they hire an outside external consulting company to do the implementation for them. So these are experts that will set up the system, hook things up, configure things, customize it to fit their company's needs. And the consultants working at that company are absolute specialists with the software. And there's really two different types of consultants. There's your technical consultants who are programmers and developers. They can go into the system and actually start reworking things. And then you have your functional consultants that still know the software very well. They can configure things and help the company through their change management when they're going on to SAP. So that is the consultant grouping. Then the second group is what I would consider like your IT managers. These are your administrators, your specialists that work, in this case, for ABC company, making sure that the system is maintained. So it's already been implemented and they know how the system works. They keep things running smoothly. If there's problems or if there's users that don't know how to handle something, they can go to these IT managers. So they usually have an intermediate level of understanding of the system. Oftentimes they're developers or at least have a little bit of developer knowledge, but not necessarily. And then the third grouping of people, which by far is the biggest, you could consider like the user base. So for ABC company, or really for any company, you're going to have a number of different roles that in some way interact with the SAP system. Predominantly, these tend to be accounting or finance types, so controllers, accounts receivable, clerks, things like that. But there's also a host of other roles. You can have inventory and warehouse managers, you can have purchasers, project managers, HR personnel. All of these roles will interact with the software in some way for the purpose of their jobs. And as I mentioned earlier on in this video, SAP is the dominant ERP software amongst large corporations. Companies like Apple, Tesla, Walmart, they all rely on SAP. So if you have a particular specialization, like as an accountant, it's always a good idea to be familiar with SAP software because it really opens up your job opportunities. So on this YouTube channel, I will be regularly releasing videos on how to use SAP, and I'll have a link down below as well as up above with the full-fledged courses that I'm going to start rolling out on my website on how to use SAP as well as get your SAP certifications. So if any of that's interesting to you, by all means take advantage of it, and I hope to see you in the next video.